Welcome to Media Path. I'm Fritz Coleman.
And I am Louise Palanker.
Here on the Media Path podcast, we are a resource, a receptacle for all of your entertainment options. We throw out some interesting picks, and if you like these interesting picks, we throw out other related interesting picks, and God willing, you'll thank us later. We also have fantastic guests, including today's. He's an iconic figure in 1970s television commercials. His warm smile, his inviting presence, his impish personality made him a favorite not only among advertisers, but among viewers and fans as well. He's Mason Reese. Can't wait to talk to Mason in just a couple of seconds. But Weezy, the big noms were announced yesterday, as we say in the business.
Yes, they were. Were you awake at 5 a.m. just to see if you might get one? Yeah, so I just wanted to fill everybody in because you're like, what, Academy Awards? Like, I don't understand. Nobody went to the movie theater. How is this happening? How is this possible? So what's going on is the 93rd Academy Award ceremony this year will be pandemically safely taking place at both the Dolby Theater and Union Station on April 25th in Los Angeles. This is 2 months later than originally planned due to the pandemic. The nominations were announced on March 15th, 2021, and I'm wondering how films even qualify. Did they play one night with, the janitor present enjoying the film? I'm not sure what you did to qualify, but we did notice that a lot of like theatrical types of releases were going straight to streaming, and we got a chance to see them. And now you have a chance to see all of them and catch up on all of the Oscar noms without ever leaving your home. So we're going to go over sort of the best picture nominees just to give you an idea of what they are and what people are going to be talking about by April 25th and how you can see them. So before we get to that, Fritz, did you have any thoughts about the nominations?
Well, my big question is, and I'm sure everybody involved in the motion picture industry wonders how far back we're going to recover from the no theater situation. Have we broken this fourth wall, and from now on, streaming will have the same validity that theater films will streaming completely replace the live experience of a theater? I hope not. But I mean, if they figure out it's economically viable, I think we might be at a point of no return, at least for smaller movies where they don't have to recoup millions of dollars in one weekend. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and they may release them at the same time and people would have an option, because I know that in the 50s, people thought that television was going to destroy the movie industry. And so people still like collecting and being together and sharing an experience, especially with the kind of picture and sound that you get and the popcorn in a movie theater experience. So I don't think that that's going to go away. But it's seeming like it's closer and closer to where you could stream it at home if you chose to. But as far as qualifying for the Oscars, we need an expert. Maybe Mason's going to be able to help us with that. But
maybe so.
Yeah, but let's go over the Best Picture nominations and where you can find them, because it's really fun to have seen everything in time for the Academy Awards, so that you can be an expert. So the first nominee for Best Picture I had not heard of, but now I'm going to be watching it. It's called The Father, starring Anthony Hopkins, and it will begin streaming. It's not even streaming yet, but it will begin streaming on Amazon Prime, iTunes, Vudu, and Google Play beginning March 26th. So I don't even know how this earned a nomination, who saw it. Maybe the janitor is an Academy member.
Well, Olivia Colman is his co-star, and you have two of the best actors in the business. So it doesn't even matter what it's about.
For sure. What do we got next, Fritz?
Judas and the Black Messiah. We talked about this film a couple of weeks ago. It's about Black Panther Fred Hampton. It was also on HBO Max. I'll tell you, I watched the trial of the Chicago 7 again last night, and there's a dovetailing plot about Fred Hampton in that movie because his assassination happens during that trial. So you can watch either of those movies and sort of four-wall the Fred Hampton experience and how important he was to Black Panther and African-American history.
And just before we moved on, for your expanded media path, there's a really great PBS documentary about the history of the Black Panthers that will, completely overlap with all of these experiences.
You got it. And another film we talked about weeks ago was Mank, about Frank Mankiewicz, the famous brothers Mankiewicz, and their their offshoots, Ben and Josh, who are still very active and successful in the television business now. It's the story about him being hired to co-write, but truthfully, he wrote it, Citizen Kane, what many people feel is the greatest film of all time. And it's a beautiful performance by Gary Oldman. And it's a gorgeous film done by David Fincher. So
you will find that on Netflix.
Yep.
So
this next one I don't know anything about, but I can't wait to see it.
Yes, I've been hearing about this one. It's called Minari. It's about a Korean-American family that moves to a farm in Arkansas. And you'll be able to find that on Amazon Prime and Google Play.
And this next one, Promising Young Woman, this is directed by Margot Robbie. This girl has not only put herself in the top of the actress pyramid in Hollywood, now she's a very successful director. This movie got a nomination for Best Picture. I don't know anything about it. It's labeled as a black comedy thriller directed by Margot Robbie. Where can we get that? Amazon Prime or Google Play, I guess.
Yes. And go ahead and talk about The Sound of Metal, Fritz, because you've seen that one.
All right. Sound of Metal I brought up last week, and I'm not surprised. This is one of those sleeper movies that nobody expects to win. Nobody expects to be moved by. This was a brilliant film, a very small film starring Riz Ahmed, who also got a nomination for Best Actor. It's his first time film work, and it's a beautiful film that has sort of parallel paths of deafness and drug addiction, but it's very moving. And and even if those two areas don't interest you, it's about being able to deal with stillness and silence in your whole life, and it's quite beautiful. I'm not surprised it got a nomination.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, we have The Trial of the Chicago 7. From Aaron Sorkin, the film chronicles the arrest and trial of peaceful Vietnam War protesters provoked and attacked by police and then very publicly tried.
I watched that again last night, Weezy, because Aaron Sorkin's dialogue there's none better, and it's so dense. There are jokes and lines and philosophies and little side comments that you miss with just one viewing. I watched it again, and that's what sort of put together the Fred Hampton subplot for me to talk about earlier.
Right. He was attending the trial daily until he was murdered.
Yep. All right. I've got some suggestions this week, and one has been nominated for Best Actress, and that is the first of my two selections, United States versus Billie Holiday. You can find it on Hulu right now. And I've got two movie suggestions this week, both about the music industry, both about females, one about fighting the racist entertainment industry, the other about fighting the sexist entertainment industry. And first, the United States versus Billie Holiday. It's a biographical film about Billie Holiday based on the book Chasing the Stream, the first and last days of the war on drugs. It's directed by Lee Daniels. In the 1940s, Billie Holiday was targeted by the government in an effort to racialize the war on drugs. And their real dark, covert aim was to get her to stop singing her controversial song about lynching called Strange Fruit. There aren't really many revelations in this film about the heartbreaking struggles of Billie Holiday. We talked about the recent film made with over 100 hours of recordings of Billie and her friends, family, and business associates called Billie. It was a beautiful film. And of course, you had Lady Sings the Blues with Diana Ross, two great views. But I think there are two gifts in this movie, Weezy. One is the performance of Andra Day as Lady Day. Her astonishing, precise duplication of Billie's voice is scary good. Her gritty melancholy and all of her spoken words that reflect the combination of her history as a beaten and abused teenage prostitute and the ravages of her addiction. It's a wonderful performance. She won Best Actress Golden Globe. And the second gift of this is something you and I have talked about on a number of occasions. It's another example of the effort to keep down prominent African Americans in the 40s through the 60s. Martin Luther King was under the thumb of J. Edgar Hoover. Fred Hampton was under the thumb of the FBI as well. It's the whole scenario that shows up in the trial of Chicago 7. It's a broad pattern. Billie's story is interesting because she ends up having an affair with the agent who was actually tracking her. So it's a wonderful movie, and it's a great homage to Billie.
Oh. So go ahead and talk about Joan Jett next, and then I'll do my pick before we introduce.
Okay. As I mentioned, the Billie Holiday movie is a struggle against the white industry. This movie, called Bad Reputation, the story of Joan Jett, is the struggle against the sexist industry. Joan is one of the preeminent female rockers. She was born in L.A. In 1975, she started the Runaways, an all-girl band that recorded and performed in the second half of the 70s. Many say she was one of the originators of punk. She will say it wasn't punk, it was just feminism. It's the story of being passed over by record labels because the labels were all men and the men were stuck in the mindset that only male acts will sell records. It's the tale of how the band, even though they were selling out concerts in Japan, they were as big as the Beatles in Japan, and selling merch by the truckloads, were making zero money. Another screwed by the record company tale. After the Runaways disbanded, a thin career period for her, she started Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. This is a great piece of LA music history, the classic early rock venues like the Whiskey and the Roxy. She's considered by many rock stalwarts like Billie Joe Armstrong of Green Day and Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters and Nirvana as one of the most important figures in rock and roll. And a touching thread in the movie is the father-daughter-like connection between Joan and her manager, Kenny Laguna. Many people in the industry couldn't stand Kenny, but he stuck by Joan through bad times and good, mortgaged his house to finance projects because he believed in her when nobody else would. Pretty touching thread in the film. If you're interested in 70s LA music scene, you might want to watch Mayor of Sunset Strip. It's the documentary about Rodney Bingenheimer, who's a former K-Rock DJ, and he was one of the first to play music by punk ladies like Joan Jett and Blondie, and he was like a preeminent dude.
Wow.
So both good films, and I know you'll love them, Weiss, because you're hugely into music.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I remember working at Kiss FM in the 80s and, being very friendly with the programming department, and they would program the music by hand. They would just program, hours of blocks of music. And the rule was you didn't put two female artists back to back. And I always found that to be somewhat peculiar. Is that like going to be so abrasive to hear the voice of two women? Dolly Parton, next to Pat Benatar is going to be like, I've had enough of this station. So it's like half the people on the planet
that's
are.
Exactly it. That was their miscalculation about women.
Yeah, and if you put like into Pandora that you want to listen to, Tracy Chapman, then Pandora thinks you just want a whole Lilith fair. It doesn't play a male artist at all. So I just don't understand why it's not the type of music rather than the gender of the person that we're attuned to. So I hopefully things are progressing.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my pick, which is also, I think, just fortuitously about a female artist. So there's a show on Apple Plus streaming that I am currently obsessed with. It's called Little Voice. And it's described as a love letter to the diverse musicality of New York City. The show explores the universal journey of finding your authentic voice and cultivating the courage to use it. The show features original music by Sara Bareilles, who, I'm learning, is a genius. It's got a cast of captivating, plucky young people earnestly finding their path while navigating the magical streets of New York City. I would call it Felicity the Musical. Which is interesting because when you dig a little, you find out that Felicity, like Little Voice, comes to us from J.J. Abrams. And a brief detour on our path. If you've never graced your soul with the bliss that is Felicity, pour yourself some cocoa and begin immediately. It is heaven. The series spans the 4 years that Felicity, played by Kerry Russell, spends at a fictional college in New York City. The eagerly anticipated finale in 2002 would reveal at long last her choice between two very heavenly boys, Ben or Noel. And around this time, you may recall, Chandra Levy went missing. and investigators were scouring her computer for clues. The show was so popular that my cousin Lois said, "Oh God, if I go missing and they take my computer, the world will learn how obsessed I am with Felicity." Little Voice possesses similar charms. Add gorgeous music and stir. Sara Bareilles is a brilliant musical artist with a bunch of hit records. Plus, with Jessie Nelson, she wrote the Broadway musical The Waitress. Little Voice is accompanied by soundtrack albums from Sara Bareilles. And there's a few. Some of them may be Spotify playlists. I'm not sure. But she sings all the songs. And then there's other cast album versions that you can find that feature the actors on the show performing all of these songs. One is called Little Voice Season 1, Cast Album. And once you get further into Sara Bareilles, you will learn that this overachiever has also written a book of essays called Sounds Like Me, My Life So Far in Song. And whenever you most need a pick-me-up moment, in fact, I recommend you start your day with this music video for her song Brave. It is an instant mood elevator. So Sara Bareilles is my current obsession. She's extraordinary.
Awesome. And do they both stream in the same area? They're both on Apple Plus. You were recommending Felicity.
Oh, Felicity. So I think you could find Felicity for free on ABC streaming.
Oh, right.
That was what it looked like. Just Google Felicity, Kerry Russell, and you'll find, and we'll have links in our show page so you can find all this content that Fritz and I are discussing. We'll make it easy for you.
Very cool. Great suggestion. Well, let's get to our awesome guest. This man was a beyond famous child actor. He was in 75 memorable commercials in the 70s when people were still entertained by commercials and didn't TiVo past them. You may remember his spot for Post-Raisin Bran or Dunkin Donuts. His most active period was 1969 through 1974. The public loved him, which led to his making frequent appearances on the Mike Douglas Show where he co-hosted. He's also a restaurateur. He's a talent representative. He opened a few popular venues in Manhattan. He describes himself as ever so slightly under 5 feet. I love that. Please welcome Mason Reese. Mason, so nice to have you.
Hey guys, how are you?
Doing great.
Fantastic.
Good to see you.
You know, Fritz, I didn't realize I did all those things.
You did. Well, as long as 50% of it is true, then we feel like we're.
Oh, I think 99 probably.
Okay. All right.
Not 99.
Well,
yeah.
I look at you and I smile, which is the same reaction millions of people had, and why you were such a gold mine for various advertisers. But here's the most important question. I want to get to the deepest, perhaps the most uncomfortable for you right off the bat, so we can clear the air.
Before we do that, the most uncomfortable thing for me is that photo that comes up under my name.
I will fix that in post.
Wait, she'll fix it.
Oh God! That's even worse.
All right, well, let me just tell you what. If you have some photos you'd rather us use, forward it to Weezy, and that's easy to do.
It's completely fine. I mean, look, I've had a weight problem my whole life, and that was when I was 212 pounds. Wow. Those photos.
Well, you're looking great. You're looking great right now, bud.
I'm 156 now, so I've literally lost over 6 pounds.
We can barely make you out.
I'm invisible.
So let me ask you this important question and clear the air. Please don't be offended. Were you allowed to keep any of the merch from the commercials? Did you get free Dunkin Donuts product for the rest of your life?
A closet of Underwood.
Well, technically, no. But any time I went into a Dunkin Donuts, I just picked out whatever I wanted, for a couple of years. Nauseatingly so. I mean, I had a lot of it. That probably led to my massive weight problem for years. And the funny thing is, Underwood Deviled Ham, which is the commercial that ran for like 5 years and won Clio Awards, and I got the Best Actor Clio that year and the whole thing. I never even tasted that product.
Wow.
Well, I hear nightmare stories from my friends who have been involved in food commercial shoots where you do 40 takes and you have to keep tasting this food, and it's nauseating by the end of the day.
Well, the thing was, the FCC had a rule back in the 70s that if a minor, someone under the age of 18, was telling the country about the product, they were not allowed to eat the product on camera.
Oh, wow.
Why not?
Only if you were 18 or over.
Okay.
Or or if you're 18 or younger, but not talking. And
Wow.
the children who played my family in the Underwood commercial, they're the ones that did all the eating.
I
But I
see.
did all the talking.
So
there you go.
basically what they were saying is we don't want children forced to lie about food they hate.
Well, and the child technically does not really understand what they're talking about.
Okay.
That's interesting.
I see.
That was the rule behind it.
So have you tasted this product since then?
I have not, Louise.
Okay. Well, let's keep that record going.
But I did see it made.
You did see it
I did go
made.
to the Underwood factory, which was in a suburb of Boston, Massachusetts, and I saw them make it. So I know how they made it, but I never tasted it.
Now, it looks to me in that commercial, Mason, like those are the same brothers of Mikey. Yes,
You
no,
know,
or just redheaded kids are adorable, period.
Oh, Louise, you're very perceptive.
Okay.
That's a family out of Long Island called the Gilchrist family. And Mikey was a young man named John Gilchrist, okay? The girl that was in my commercial that played my sister, I believe was John's sister.
Oh, wow.
Now the older brother with the reddish hair, he was not a Gilchrist, okay? But the young girl was.
Now, do you, because you're a genius and you were a child genius, do you think that you have a more vivid memory of early childhood than say,
No.
average folk? No?
No, I actually don't. There are a lot of stories about Mike Douglas and about some of the commercial spots that I did over the years. People tell me stories that were there, and I don't remember them per se. I remember getting up. I remember reading my lines. I remember doing take after take, and I remember going home.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest is kind of a little bit amorphous, a little bit of a blur for me. But I remember not enjoying some jobs, not having as much fun on them as others. As I got older in life, I started to have less fun than I did when I was younger. My career technically ended in '84, actually. But I wasn't doing very much at that point. And a lot of it was really a two-way situation. Number one, I wasn't enjoying the work, but number two, I also wasn't getting the knock on the door. Mm-hmm. So I was really okay with that. I kind of just wanted to be, and I know this sounds very generic, but I wanted to be a kid.
Yeah.
I really wanted to try to figure out what this whole teenage thing was all about. And in the business, you don't really have the time for that.
Let me probe that a little bit, because you were talking about what they do and do not allow children to do on sets and regulations. But how do you feel about what you experienced, the whole child stardom thing? Are you supporting that? I have children, and my two sons for like 2 weeks decided they wanted to go on commercial calls. So I thought, well, I don't want to shut this down. If they really love to do it and it came from them, yes. That's not bad. But what are your thoughts about that? Is it?
Fritz, I could not agree with you more. I personally don't have any children. My dog is my child. But if I had a child and one day that child said, "Hey, Dad, I've kind of got the bug. You know, I really want to try this out. I mean, I know you used to do it when you were young." I would encourage it. I would do the very best I can, but I'd be very honest about it. And I would have to explain to them that you really need to have thick skin, and you need to understand rejection is not personal. It's a professional thing. I mean, there are a lot of things. I would have to kind of put a little bit of armor around them, because I don't want to see them get hurt.
Yeah. My kids were like 10 and 8, and that was the hard part. We keep driving all these places, and they just keep saying no. Do they ever say yes? And I say, not until you're 40. Right? And then, then they'll say it. But that rejection, I think, is really difficult for a lot of kids that don't have a particularly hardy self-esteem to take.
Yeah, I got to tell you something. You know, a lot of my good friends that live in LA are former child actors. And number one, I grew up in New York City. So it was a little bit different for me than a lot of my contemporaries that really did most of their work in LA or the West Coast. But my particular situation is very unique. Number one, I landed the very first audition I ever had. I beat out 800 other kids for the part because, number one, I looked really young. I mean, I was 4. I was really young. But I looked even younger because I was small, okay? But then all of a sudden, at the age of 4, I could take a script and memorize it backwards and forwards. Wow. And that was unheard of, you know? Plus, I looked different. You know, I wasn't the all-American blonde with the blue eyes and the little freckles on the nose. You know, I was very different looking. And I would like to think that, number one, right place, right time. Number two, that I looked different. But I also would like to think, because it would make me happy if it were true, that I was very good at what I did. So
I think so. Yeah, no, I think for sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Well, I mean, I don't know of any other child actors who were predominantly known for their commercial work, were asked by Mike Douglas to co-host with him every day for a week. So that's your personality. That's you, Mason.
Actually, Louise, I did it for 3 weeks.
Right. And that's all Mason. That's
not consecutively, but I did 1 week, 1 week, 1 week.
Yeah, because he loved it.
I believe that I'm also on the record for the fact that I am the only person to be on the cover of TV Guide that was not a movie star, that was not a soap opera actor, or a lead in a nighttime show.
Wow.
So that's kind of a unique situation right there.
Yeah, I think that's people falling in love with you and not the lines you're reading, you know, just you. And there was something about you that was fascinating because how is this kid so delightful and brilliant? That you're cracking up Mike Douglas.
Yeah, the word back then was precocious.
Okay.
That was the word that everybody used about me. You know, the funny thing was, my family, you know, took it pretty well, I would say. But a lot of people actually thought that I was a midget, thought that I was an adult.
Well, they used to say that about Shirley Temple. Any child actor that's very, very good, there's always going to be people saying that can't be.
Yeah, or maybe a little bit ahead of their time, or maybe ones that can keep up with adults, you know, in a live television program type of thing.
Right.
But Mike was the best. He really loved me. He really cared about me. And the producers of the Mike Douglas show understood, number one, he's 7. So he has the attention span of a monkey on acid, okay? So what they did was, it was a 90-minute show back then. So they wanted to keep me entertained as much as possible. So they would bring on people from various television shows and programs that I really enjoyed. You know,
I see.
Like Leonard Nimoy from Star Trek and Peter Lucas from Mission Impossible. You know, they'd bring all these people on because they had to keep Mason Reese happy for 90 minutes.
And you got to interview them a little bit.
That's crazy.
I mean, Mike did most of the interviewing, but as the co-host, I definitely asked questions and put in my own little 2 cents every now and then as best as I could. But like I said, they kept me pretty entertained for 90 minutes.
Well, I was watching some of the clips on your YouTube channel, which you can find at Mason Reese. And I noticed that at the beginning, I don't know if it was just this one series of appearances, but at the beginning, and every time he would call you son, you would say, "Don't call me son." Probably you're thinking, I have a father and it's not you. And by the end of the week, you said to him, and it's so touching, when you said to him, "You can call me son,"
you can call me son.
Yeah, he was really moved by that.
He was. And the truth of the matter is, he was a family man. And he had 3 daughters. And had been married to his wife, Genevieve, 30 plus years at that point, you know. And he was a really wonderful Irish family man. His real last name was Michael Delaney O'Dowd. That was his real name. That was his birth name. And I guess for TV they changed it to Douglas to make it a little bit more American, you know. But he wanted always to have a son, and he never had one. So I guess vicariously he kind of lived that out through me.
Beautiful.
Let's talk about your start. Your mom was an actress, right?
There we are. By the way, I wish I had that director's chair today, but I don't. That would be something I would really like to own today if I could have, but
wow, I wonder where it is.
Unfortunately not. That's my mom, right?
Your mom, yeah. She's beautiful.
Yeah.
So she was an actress.
And comes in later. Yeah, my mom was an actress. She was in the biggest role that she ever did was in a movie called The Big Sleep with Humphrey Bogart. She was Agnes, the bookstore girl, that had 3 or 4 pivotal scenes with Humphrey Bogart in that movie. But
she's quite beautiful.
Yeah, she was a beautiful lady, extremely intelligent. A pain in my butt for a good part of my life, but the guiding force, and my rock. She just passed away, by the way.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Back in July. 96 years old.
Oh,
96.
bless her heart. So
And I took care of her for many years, and we were very, very close.
So was the choice to go do auditions your idea or hers, or a combination?
No, either one. There was a woman who lived in our building whose son at the time was young. He was about 8 or 9. He did a lot of print modeling. Didn't do a lot of on-air work or a lot of camera work, but he did a lot of print modeling. And when I was 2 years old, she just thought I was the most adorable little precocious little child. And my mom actually turned her down, said, no, there's just no way. I've got other young kids in the house. I can't even think about, carrying Mason in one arm and, a diaper bag in the other, Now, the lady kept on persisting for 2 more years until I was just over 4 years old. And at that point, my mom brought up the idea, and I loved it. But that was when we found out that I could memorize scripts backwards and forwards. So
were you reading at that point?
I could memorize them. Yes, I read. When I was 7, I was analyzed with a 3rd-year college reading level.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, my. Wow.
Now I think when I'm going to be 56 in a few days, as a matter of fact, I think now I probably read at a 3rd grade reading level.
Do you remember some lines from your previous commercials?
Do I remember what, Fritz?
Do you remember any lines from your commercials?
Yeah, there was a commercial for a company called Betcha Bacon. It was kind of like a Dorito, like a bacon flavored snack, and there was like a little poem in that. I remember that explicitly. But it's funny. I did a pilot for a TV show back in 1975 with Barry Nelson and Barbara Stewart called Mason. We can talk about that, but there's a whole story behind that. But I watched the show. I have that up on my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And I watched the show, and to myself, as every actor was reciting their lines, I remembered them.
Wow.
All of a sudden, it was like literally like a light bulb went off in my head. And all of a sudden, all these different actors' lines came right back to me.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of weird.
You have another great sitcom experience. I'm sorry, Weezy, just while we're on this topic, where I think when I read this, I thought that is found money. You and Gary Coleman were going to do a sitcom where you were retired child stars and you opened your own private detective agency.
Let me tell you something. My friend Dave Shelton, who's a writer out in LA, he and I came up with this. 2 former child stars. We're at an autograph show. Somehow or another, we solve a crime that happens. And we decide that we're going to open up an elite private investigation agency. And let me tell you something. Gary loved it. He was on board. But he said to me at the time, it was like, to me, it was Moonlighting meets The Odd Couple meets Get Smart. Right? That was like the pitch, the one-liner. Mm-hmm. And Gary, God bless him, he wanted to be like Oscar. He wanted to be the crazy, zany, and wanted me to be the more controlled, kind of a straight-faced guy. And I said, Gary, if we sell the show, am I allowed to curse, by the way?
Sure.
Of course.
I said, Gary, you can do whatever the fuck you want. We sell this show. You could have whatever. He goes, I do dialysis 3 times a week. I said, yes, I'm aware of that. So if you do it Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, we'll shoot it on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I don't really care. Whatever makes you happy. So he was on board. I went to TV Land, who at the time was really getting a name for themselves, but they didn't have any original programming yet. Okay. And I met with Sal Maniaci, who was at that point in time the vice president of TV Land under Larry Jones. And I had nothing. I didn't have a sizzle reel. I didn't have a script. I had nothing. All I said was, Mason Reese, Gary Coleman, Detectives in Hollywood, Get Smart, meets Moonlight, meets The Odd Couple. He fell out of his chair.
Oh, yeah. That was my reaction when I read it.
He said, is Gary on board? I said, 100%. He goes, do you have a producer? I said, absolutely. It got to the point where they were going to send us money through bank accounts, however they do it, to have a writer write a pilot script for it. But at the time, Bill Cosby was developing a show for them called Parenthood, and it ended up going way over budget and way past due. So they dropped it.
I think it's pretty clear that they bet on the wrong horse.
Oh, seriously?
Yes, they did on that one. I mean, we literally could have been the very first original project for TV Land.
Wow.
Such a great idea.
And unfortunately, he ups and dies on me. So there you go.
Well, we just need to pick a different co-star. There's lots to choose from.
Not really, Louise. Not really. There was something very special about Gary. You know, I don't want to get too maudlin about Gary, but to use an analogy, if you have a big softball and you lob that ball 10 miles an hour over the plate, Gary would swing and miss at everything. He just was such an angry young man. You know, he was so angry and so sad. You know, and I got to meet him first before I even pitched him the idea. And he liked me a lot because I think he realized that I'd been through a lot of the same things, that even though I was a New York guy, he was an LA guy, that we were similar in a lot of ways. And he really took to that.
Yeah. I mean, and you do, I guess you feel very alone when your circumstances are so incredibly unique that you just don't share them with anyone.
Yeah. I mean, nobody could really fully understand what happened to Gary. I mean, you're the star of the #1 show on NBC, and then you're dropped. That's it. You're gone. And NBC doesn't even give you an option to do another show. That's it. You're done.
And
So
there's some parental issues there. His parents taking advantage of his money and all this other stuff that was very, very sad.
True Hollywood fact, I was a page on the show, and so I knew Gary, and I saw all this in person, and yes, he was a sad boy.
Yeah. And he was also going through tremendous challenges with his health at the time. And the fact that he was able to produce a show and get a really good quality show, weekly, 26, 28 times a year, whatever it was at the time, was kind of miraculous, really going what he was going through.
It was heroic, yes.
Yeah, it was. It was. And he actually told me at one point in time, he said, I have no family, I have no friends.
Oh, Lord.
Wow.
Yeah. Kind of broke me down a little bit, because he never drank, he never did drugs. He was always a very straight shooter.
He bought a lot of trains.
He bought a lot of model trains and, did some commercials for a few strange companies and had a couple of strange jobs and ran for mayor, I think, at one point, or governor. I don't remember which one it was, but it wasn't real. He wasn't really trying. He was just trying to get his name out there.
Now, when you think about your childhood, does a smile come to your lips, or do you think in a lot of ways that since you were a gifted child that you may not have been challenged enough if you had a more ordinary childhood, or do you wish that you had? Well,
in terms of challenging, I hated school. I literally hated going to school because it bored me. It just, I tell people all the time, when you've co-hosted the Mike Douglas show, done all the commercials I had, won the awards, been on the cover of magazines, piloted the Goodyear blimp, and been the ringmaster of Barnum and Bailey Circus, algebra's pretty boring.
Wow,
yeah,
that's very interesting.
That's hard. That is hard to top.
Yeah.
Did you have tutors and tutors or teachers on set, or were you not on commercial sets long enough for that to happen?
No, commercials never really had them. I did have a private tutor given to me by the New York City Board of Education at one point because I wasn't attending enough school. That was a combination of my own working and my own just not really wanting to go. I knew at a very young age that whatever I was going to do with life was not going to be determined by a little 8x10 piece of paper in a frame up on a wall, right? So I never went to college. And technically, I never graduated from high school. I mean, I did get a GED, but that wasn't first and foremost for me.
Are you a reader?
Not now. No, and I hate to admit it. When you guys were talking about Oscar predictions and things like that, the only movie I'd even remotely heard of was the Chicago 7. Mm-hmm. Now, I am a member of Screen Actors Guild now. I'm a paid dues member. So I am getting screeners sent to my house. And I will eventually watch them. But I'm not an avid reader. I was when I was young. But now I find that anything longer than a small article in a magazine, my mind just starts wandering.
So you're very imaginative and you're always thinking.
Yeah, but maybe I'm just not reading the right thing either. That's a possibility too.
Well, I'll tell you, I have 3 kids and 2 grandchildren, and you cannot tell them this. And you have to put on this ruse until they're finished their last year of college that none of that matters. If you're going to be successful in life, you will be successful. It doesn't matter what college you went to. It doesn't matter what high school you went to. It doesn't matter what amount of formal education you've had. If you are going to be successful, if it's divine intervention, if it's your personal drive, you will be successful. But you can't tell that to your kids because they stop doing their homework.
No, and I completely agree with that. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of unbelievably talented people out there, far more talented than I've ever been, that will never get a break. And you have to wonder why about that sometimes.
That's interesting, yeah.
People at 30, 40 years in business, grinding day after day, and they never make it.
Yeah.
They never make it. But,
well, this never happened to Gary, and it doesn't happen to the majority of child stars. But you were able to transition to a productive adulthood as a restaurateur and as a talent representative. Are there any of your venues that are still open in New York?
No. I retired from that back in 2015. I did 20 years in the hospitality world in New York City. And I'm very proud to say, in 20 years, I never smoked a cigarette. I never smoked pot. I never had a drink in my life. I made a lot of money serving drinks to other people, but I personally never did it. Just not something I ever wanted to do. But 20 years owning restaurants and bars and nightclubs in New York City is kind of like dog years.
Yeah. It's a 24/7 job.
It's a tough job. And it got to the point where I really was not enjoying waking up every day and going into work. And at that point in time, my partners and I kind of agreed, and we just went our separate ways. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Did you sell the business?
Yeah, we sold the last bar, which is a place called Destination in the Lower East Side of New York City. We sold that to a great guy who owns a bunch of places in New York. And I kind of never really looked back. Mm-hmm. I think the late hours and the combination of the loud music and being around drunken people all the time probably beat me up emotionally.
Yeah,
you knew a lot. You knew a lot about that lifestyle because you frequented clubs in your early adulthood, right?
Oh, I did. That's how I learned about clubs, was going to them.
What I'm going to read to you is a testimonial to 2 things: your brilliance as a human being, and second of all, your expertise at the club environment. You said once, I don't know what the question was. Somebody was talking about. Are clubs a good place to meet women and have a talk? And you said, clubs are not for conversation. The object is not to hear, but to use the other senses. I never had a conversation last longer than 10 or 15 minutes. I got back to my apartment. Maybe in the morning we talked. I never knew their names, but they knew mine. I was at a disadvantage. I just thought sums up.
I know exactly where that's from. That's from the New York Times. That was in 1995, right after I opened up my first nightclub. The lady who was writing for the Times came and interviewed me at the club, not at night. She came during the day when it was nice and quiet. But yeah, no, I mean, listen, I started going out.
But it was so perceptive. Anybody that fought that thinking they're going to find Mr. Perfect or Miss Perfect in a club just understands that phrase beautiful.
No, and I knew that at a very, very young age. And I started going to nightclubs in New York in 1982, where I was only 17, maybe 17 and a half. But, I was riding the wave of my fame. So I was getting recognized everywhere. And I was being treated like royalty in all of the nightclubs. But I knew that, look, when you look at me, you automatically don't see a big strapping, 6'4", 200-pound quarterback, So if you're with me, either you're with me because I'm famous or because I'm intelligent and I'm funny and I have a good heart and whatever other good things, attributes I have. But I knew that back in the 80s that New York City nightclubs, nobody talks. You dance and then you go home and screw, if you're lucky.
Well, it's what it's designed for is it's designed to invite and create physical intimacy because A, you're inebriated, B, the loud music means you have to get very close to people in order to be heard. So it takes away all those human inhibitions and allows people to smush up against each other. And if so inclined, they can go home. But even if they don't go home and have sex with someone, they still got their physical needs met by just close proximity to the opposite sex or the same sex, whatever they're into.
And I met a lot of women along the way that just really wanted to dance.
Sure.
They really just wanted to sweat and move to the music. And, back in the discos, 54 and Area and all these other clubs in New York, the music was phenomenal. Not like it is today. No offense to anybody who loves today's music. Not a big fan. It was a very different world back then, especially in New York City. So, again, like I said, kind of riding the crest of being famous, along with the fact that there were these amazing clubs, was quite a unique time for me.
Now, were your parents at all concerned that after creating this completely unique childhood for you, and then, which seems fine when you're 7, like it seems probably to your parents like, oh, I've got a handle on this, but now they've launched you into your young adult life, and were they concerned that you didn't maybe have the tools to make good choices?
Well, no. When we're saying good choices, I assume that you're talking about drugs and alcohol, things like that.
I just mean everything, the people that you choose to associate with, career moves, everything, really.
No, honestly, I had 2 very open-minded liberal parents, Jewish, one from Texas, believe it or not, and my mom is from Texas. Probably the only Jewish family in her area, probably. And my father was from New Hampshire. But they were both very open-minded. I was never bar mitzvahed. It just wasn't something that was pushed up, down my throat like a lot of parents do. But when I turned that 17, 18-year-old range, my parents knew that I wasn't drinking. They knew I wasn't getting stoned and getting high. My parents could have cared less who I dated or who I brought home at the time. They really were just concerned about my health overall and the fact that I was happy. Those are the 2 things that were the most important. Number 1, that I wasn't sad or going through any grief because at that point my career really was over, or whether I was doing things physically that weren't making me healthy. That was really about it.
So, and in that way, you had a different childhood than Gary's. In that way, it was different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, my father, when I was young, he was the vice president of the Ideal Toy Company. So he didn't need my money. He was a graphic artist, and then he had his own multimedia production company. So my father made a lot of money over the years.
Yeah, and then you got to where you didn't need his toys. You had the blimp.
But I did go to Toy Fair every year.
Ah, heaven.
As a young child. And that was a lot of fun because every toy company in the world wanted to give me like demo toys and things like that. They were happy just to have me there. But no. My parents were really cool. As a matter of fact, a quick story. I did the Mike Douglas show once, and Ava Gabor was the co-host. And I did a normal 7-minute segment or 10 minutes, whatever it was. And it went well, but I was very frightened. I was really scared to go on stage right before the show. And my father did not push me. All he said to me was, I'm going to make a bet with you. that within 30 seconds of your being out there, you're going to be okay. And all the fear is going to go. And if I'm wrong, well, I'm wrong, and well, whatever. And he was right. So very lucky that I had very open-minded and very loving parents that, number one, didn't steal from me because they didn't have to. And number two, led me down a good path.
Wonderful.
Wow. I want to talk about your relationships, Mason. Are you still with Sarah? Is Sarah still?
I am still with Sarah. Right now, one of the things most people don't know, I left New York City. I'm actually in Delray Beach, Florida now. Where
my whole family lived in Boca Raton. I'm familiar with
right
Delray.
next door.
Yep.
It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Where all the good old Jews come to die. You know, we come to Boca, we come to Delray, right? God's waiting room, as they say.
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to say that you had a very unique situation. This is a strikingly beautiful woman. She was an adult model for her career.
Yes.
And you took a lot of heat on the internet and in your personal life because people, and I guess there was sort of a protective aspect to it. People thought that maybe this gorgeous woman was taking advantage of you either for your money or for your fame. And you said something quite beautiful when you were describing the relationship. You said, I didn't think that this really beautiful young adult model would find anything remotely fascinating about a 54-year-old man. When you meet someone and end up talking for 3 hours effortlessly, no pauses, no breaks, no uncomfortable moments of real silence, that's kind of unusual. And I think she felt the same as me. I just found that to be very touching. And so it ought to shut down all the questions.
Fritz. I'm very impressed. Yeah, I mean, look, to say that the relationship is perfect would be an overstatement. I mean, I'm not particularly happy with some of the things that she does professionally, but that is how she makes her living. And I do not support her financially whatsoever. And she's free to make whatever choices she wants. Right now, mainly because of COVID, the whole situation with that, she lives in Pittsburgh, and I'm here now. We are talking about her coming sometime at the end of June, maybe early July, for who knows how long. Maybe she'll even move here. I really don't know. But the relationship has its ups and downs, like all relationships for that matter. But the fact that there's a 28-year age difference certainly doesn't help. It's not easy all the time.
No, it's a testimonial to the rock star you are, my friend.
I'll have to tell Sarah that next time I speak.
Please do.
That Fritz Coleman called me a rock star.
Can you talk about your current projects? I know you're working on a few things.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm working on, and right before the show, we had some technical issues. And boy, am I going to have to fix those. I'm working with this guy, Steve Gadlin. He's kind of well known because he was on Shark Tank and made a crazy deal with Mark Cuban for a cat drawing thing. But he has his own podcast, like you guys do, and he wants to work with me and be my producer. So I have an idea that I've been rumbling around in my head for years now about a project called Take Two with Mason Reese. And the focus of the show really is a half-hour, one-on-one interview-style format, but all the guests are either former or present child stars. And we talk about life, and we talk about love. And in fact, at one point in time, Steve Gadlin was a producer over at MeTV. So we're going to shoot a demo for it. We're going to put it together with music and artwork and a background and the whole thing, make it look really good, and then we're going to pitch it to MeTV and see what happens.
I think that would be amazing. I'll just
I bet that would be huge.
A personal, just a personal aside that will help you with your understanding of like what that means to people that grew up, watching certain shows, which is really all of us. But on Facebook yesterday, I found an interview that had Jerry Mathers talking to the guy who played Gilbert. I found myself thinking about that interview all throughout the subsequent 24 hours. The things they remembered, they were talking about crew members' names. They were talking about certain scenes. They were talking about when Hugh Beaumont would direct, and I was in. Do you understand me? I was in.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of people who fit that demographic, that would absolutely love to hear the inside, behind-the-scenes stories of certain child actors' lives. There's a small group on Facebook. It's not known to anybody. It's a private group called the XCA, standing for Ex-Child Actors.
Okay.
There's about 250 of us on the board.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a very deep well that I can fish from.
Sure.
To get guests. And if I did the show once a week, I could probably have the next 3 years of guests booked. Literally, that would want to do it. So what Steve and I are going to do, we're going to start it off using a company called SteamYard. I don't know if you guys...
I have them. They're a step up from Zoom. They're a wonderful streaming service.
Yeah. So Steve's going to produce the show, and I'll book it, and obviously I'll host it. Mm-hmm. And what we'll do is we'll do YouTube and Facebook Live. Mm-hmm. We'll start off with that as a proof of concept, okay? Right. Build the audience, and then ultimately pitch it to MeTV. Maybe somewhere else as well. I have no idea. But seeing as that we have the in at MeTV, that'll be our first place to go. The other project is, I don't know if you guys remember, a wonderful actor and just an amazing guy, a guy named Robbie Rist.
Yes.
Who was Cousin Oliver in the Brady Bunch.
Yes.
But he's done tremendous voice work over the years, and he's an amazing musician, has produced albums, played. He's unbelievably talented. Unfortunately, because of COVID, he's not really playing out anymore out in LA. There's no concerts really to do. But he's got a studio in his house, and he records music. And we are developing a 1-hour drama, a very dark 1-hour drama, Untitled as of now, but it's a female Latina lead character, takes place in Hell's Kitchen of New York City. So we're in the process of getting that script finished and then building the arc, the storylines and the show Bible and all the other words that you guys know. And then we'll take it from there and see what happens.
Awesome. So you're
very busy.
I like both the ideas.
Well, thank you. I got to tell you something. Getting out of New York City has done wonders for me.
I'm sure.
I mean, just being in the warmth of Florida and the sun, and I'm a much happier, more relaxed human being now.
I'm happy to hear that.
Well, I'll tell you, it was a real pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thank you.
I think that maybe we proved today what the success of the show with other child stars will be, that they've all had different life experiences, that many are deep and interesting with fascinating storylines, and I think you'll be able to tap into that. Plus,
if I have a moment, what I don't want to do is I don't want to focus on the negative.
Right.
Ideally, I'd love to focus on the positive, on the fact that you can go through that entire ordeal and get through the tunnel on the other side,
right,
and still be okay. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of actors that I'm going to interview have really, really horrible stories. Yeah. They really do. And the fact that my story is probably very different from theirs, as well as everybody I interview is going to have a little bit of a different story, different stories to tell. And I think the real secret to the show is that I want to focus on the positive. I don't want people walking away from the show bawling their eyes out. Mm-hmm. I want them to have optimism and happiness.
Yep.
Excellent.
Well, I want to thank you. It's been a real treat to have a chance to talk to you, sir. You're smart and interesting, and I wish you luck with your future projects.
I really appreciate you guys reaching out to me.
Okay. Absolutely. I'm going to go read the closing credits, Mason, and I just want to thank you. This was a wonderful conversation. Yes, of course. We would love for you to join us online on Instagram and Twitter, where we are at MediaPathPod, and on Facebook, where we are MediaPath Podcast. You can find full episodes with all kinds of bonus visual content on our YouTube channel, MediaPath Podcast. We would love to know what media you've been enjoying. You can contact us at our social media or email us at mediapathpodcast@gmail.com. I want to thank our wonderful guest, Mason Reese. Our team includes Dina Friedman, Francesco Demanda, John Maddox, Sharon Bellio, Bill Filipiak, Thomas Hubble, and you. I am Louise Palanker here with Fritz Coleman, and we will see you along the media path. That was great, Mason.
Hey, Mason, that was awesome.
Sorry about the technical.